When you think of the character Revan, what do you think of? Your mind probably drifts off to a man in a black and red robes, with a mask, wielding a red and a purple lightsaber, who is perfectly balanced in the Force and is the poster boy for, air quotes, gray Jedi, who don't follow the light or dark side and forge their own path in the galaxy. What if I told you that and everything Star Wars YouTube channels which have you think of this character is almost all incorrect? So we have to start this video where most videos about Revan start, his origin. Revan is very famously the protagonist of Knights of the Old Republic 1. Revan's gender, morality, and overall story had a fair amount of player choice involved, and while my preferred choice is as a female, the canon playthrough for Revan is a light side male, and I'll be proceeding as such. So to sum up Knights of the Old Republic and its surrounding lore, Revan defies the Jedi Council to go to war against the Mandalorians who are decimating the Republic, wins the war, disappears from known space, and returns at the head of an invasion force, initiating the Jedi Civil War. He's then presumed killed by Bastila. Malak reveals later in the first game that the player was an amnesiac Revan all along. Revan then finds the remaining star maps, kills Malak, redeems Bastila, and the Starforge is destroyed. Revan is then hailed as the Prodigal Knight. And that's just for Knights of the Old Republic 1. It's revealed in Knights of the Old Republic 2, which again will go off assuming Revan was a light side male, that Revan started having his memories come back to him and once again left known space and hasn't been seen since. And it's in this game that we get the characterization that so many people love. We hear from Kreia, Mandalore, who is Canderous from Knights of the Old Republic 1, who traveled with Revan, and many others about how Revan carried himself during the Mandalorian Wars. How he would let certain systems fall in order to bolster others, fought the Mandalorians' ferocity with a high body count and ferocity of his own. He grew to hate weakness and forged the Jedi into a weapon to be used against the Mandalorians. All of this culminated in the Battle of Malachor V, where he relayed to one of his generals, who would go on to be the Jedi Exile, to activate the mass shadow generator, utterly crushing the Mandalorians, as well as killing thousands of Republic troops and Jedi as well. This showed how far Revan had come from being a Jedi Knight. It was also on Malachor that he found the Trace Academy, a remnant of the old Sith Empire, and from here is where the story gets even more interesting. From there, Revan and Malak go into unknown space. Here they encounter the old Sith Empire, follow the star maps, and the Starforge, instigating the events of the first game. But where does all the character for Revan come from? Well, most of it came from Kreia, who was Revan's first of many masters. She gives you some of the best insights into Revan and his character, and why he did what he did. She also poses many profound questions to the exile about Revan, who up until then was a blank slate for the player to imprint on. How was he able to get so many followers? Well, it's because he was a natural leader that people wanted to follow and were willing to go along with his point of view. How did he get Force users on his side? We learn in the game that he was recruiting and converting Jedi to his cause during the Jedi Civil War. But most importantly, we the player can ask, why did Revan fall? And I'll let Kreia explain it.
Revan's choices were always his own. It was not teaching or circumstance or example, it was him. And there is something that the Council may never understand, that perhaps Revan never fell. The difference between a fall and a sacrifice is sometimes difficult, but I feel that Revan understood that difference more than anyone knew. The galaxy would have fallen if Revan had not gone to war. Perhaps he became the Dark Lord out of necessity, to prevent a greater evil. I do not believe the Jedi Council changed Revan as they claimed. They merely stripped away the surface and allowed the true self to emerge again, someone who was willing to wage war to save others.
So here we have the very important point brought up of if Revan never truly fell in his heart to the dark side, or if he chose to sacrifice himself first against the Mandalorians and then later to prepare the Republic for the inevitable invasion of the Sith Empire. These questions and queries drive what makes the character of Revan more interesting than a blank slate that he originally was. And debates between this have permeated out of the game and continue online to this day. You can make a case going either way, Revan turning into what he became in a quest to prepare the Republic for what they would eventually meet one day, only to continue down the dark path more completely. I think that's a much better story than what we inevitably got. The tragic story of the man who sacrificed his morality, his soul, to prepare the Republic for the inevitable war that was to come. But what we ended up getting was a complete betrayal of what was set up in Knights of the Old Republic 2. In the Revan novel that preceded the Old Republic MMO, it's revealed that when Revan and Malak went into the unknown regions after the Mandalorian Wars, they did indeed find the Sith Empire as before. But now it's added that Revan and Malak also met the Emperor Vitiate, who dominated Revan and Malak's mind, twisting them and turning them to the dark side, and sent them to claim the Starforge for him. But upon leaving the Empire, Revan and Malak break free of Vitiate's control and decide instead to form their own empire, and everything proceeds from here as before. But the fate of Revan is revealed, where he fails to assassinate the Emperor and is taken prisoner for 300 years. This novel single-handedly destroyed the agency that Revan was given in Knights of the Old Republic 2 by making him a former mind slave who was just able to break free from his chains and go on his own way to the dark side. How can you reconcile Revan as a tragic character who fell out of a necessity to defend the galaxy from an imminent threat when he only embraced the dark side because of Vitiate? Short answer, you can't make these two stories work together. The two exist as completely different versions of the character. One is greatly added character to a formerly blank slate, and the other was added in as a cash grab to sell the MMO. So at the end of the day, what do people like that gets them so engrossed by Revan? Well, I would say that people are engrossed by a false version of Revan built up by many YouTube videos. What do I mean by this? How many times have you seen a video posted hyping Revan up as a gray Jedi, air quotes, who perfectly used both sides of the Force and wielded his purple and red lightsaber, which of course perfectly shows his balance? Well, if you've seen my lightsaber color video, links in the description if you haven't, you would know that lightsaber color outside of fan canon and Knights of the Old Republic 1 do not have any meaning other than to denote who is a good guy and who is a bad guy, as per George Lucas. So that bit of fanon about Revan being gray is already out. And on the subject of using both sides of the Force, the idea that Revan ever did that comes from one passage in the Revan novel, which, given that it ignores Knights of the Old Republic 2 basically in its entirety, the novel and MMO should they themselves be ignored. And it's not mentioned anywhere else, nor is the idea that Revan uses both sides of the Force even a thought outside of fan fiction. So without that fanon detail being added, what else draws people to Revan? Well, when you see people post about why they like him, another reason that inevitably gets brought up is his power, often quoting Kreia, saying that Revan was like staring into the heart of the Force. My response to this is, why would you base your like or dislike of a character on how powerful they are, rather than how well they're written? But of course, when it's brought up, oftentimes it's brought up in hypothetical versus matches, which is a totally fine context to be talking about power. But any other time, air quotes, power in the Force should be negligible, especially if you've played Knights of the Old Republic 2 and understand the ideas you can take from it. So between the three versions of the character, what do we have? Firstly, we have a fanon version of Revan, who is a, air quotes, gray Jedi, who wields both sides of the Force perfectly with his red and purple sabers. On a side note, the idea that Revan wielded those colored lightsabers comes from a vision in Knights of the Old Republic 2. In all other depictions of Revan until the Revan DLC for the Old Republic, including the novel, Revan wielded a single lightsaber. This fanon version is by far the weakest version of the character, since it completely ignores both games and insists on forcing the fanon versions of lightsaber colors as well as the fanon definition of gray Jedi, who are agents of neutrality in the Force rather than the in-universe definition. Secondly, we have the version of Revan as presented in the Revan novel and the following Old Republic MMO. This version is barely better than the last, considering Drew Karpyshyn, who wrote the Revan novel, completely ignored the character given to Revan in Knights of the Old Republic 2. Gone is the tragic hero who embraced the dark side out of desperation. In his place, we're given a mind slave, Dominated, who simply broke free of Vitiate's control and decided to become evil because he felt like it once they reached the Starforge. This has the same problem as the previous version, where the events and character given to him in Knights of the Old Republic 2 are ignored, in favor of the story they wanted to tell, which completely ignores the logic of Revan's character. This is a Revan who has a literal personality split and dual competing identities, and eventually turns to becoming a Darksider again. And while this Revan has small hints in the Old Republic that he's willing to make the ends justify the means by unleashing destruction onto the Sith, this is a betrayal of the Revan who sought to strengthen the Republic first and foremost as his reason for falling, not out of blind rage and hatred for the Sith. And lastly, we have the original, untampered with Revan, the character who fell to the dark side because of his experiences in the Mandalorian Wars, which started him down the dark path only to become cemented when he found the Sith Empire and deduced that the Republic and Jedi Order in their current stages could not stand against the Sith. He was willing to give up his morality for the greater good and make the ends justify the means. This is a version of Revan you could argue never truly fell and never embraced the Sith ideals in his heart. The same cannot be said about the other two versions. It is clear that this should be the definitive version of the character when he is brought up. A character who is willing to sacrifice himself for what he thought of as the good of the galaxy, rather than a mind slave who frees themselves and runs amok. So the question that I feel should be posed by this video: do Star Wars fans like Revan for the character he was given? Or do Star Wars fans like Revan because of the fabrications of YouTube channels and their fanfiction level ideas about him? Or are they gotten from a novel and an MMO that completely ignore all the character he was given in Knights of the Old Republic 2? Hopefully you have found this analysis of the character Revan informative, and that you can understand why Revan was a much better character before the Old Republic MMO made the simple change in why he fell to the dark side. Until next time, this has been Cade from the Lore Council, signing off.